Spoilers ahead for Lord of the Rings of Power, Episode 3. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Script Department. Today I'm joined by Brad. We're going to be looking at the Lord of the Rings Episode 3. That is the Rings of Power, of course. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. You can find us over at thescriptdepartment.net for what our global network of screenwriters are up to. You can find historical episodes of The Script Department on your Spotify's, on your YouTube's, on your Apple Podcasts, all of these different places for all of the good stuff, including episodes 1 and 2 of The Rings of Power, for which Brad and I went to the world premiere. You can check out all of that good stuff, including some dubiously shot footage on our YouTube channel. So enjoy that. But Brad, we are here once again. We're back. I'd say we're firmly in Middle Earth at this point. We've got through those first couple of episodes. We're in Middle Earth again. We're getting acclimatized. What did you think of episode 3, entitled Adar?
So I liked it. It was a bit slower pace. I liked where we went with it. As a Jackson verse main eventer rather than a Tolkien aficionado, I felt like I was learning quite a lot, and I was like, "Oh, yeah!" What? And just the way it was presented was quite accessible for someone who might not be a fan of the books, because I was like, "Oh yeah, of course. Look, I know that I can see what that means, and it kind of makes sense." I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing more parts of this world. We're away from Middle Earth on the in this episode more. I know we have been all the episodes, but just to see other lands in this world has been great. So I really enjoyed it. There were a few slow points. Some of the dialogue was a bit slower in this episode, but yeah, I've other than that, I was quite happy with this one.
Yeah, it was a bit more of a world building event episode, I think, wasn't it? And quite understandably so. There is so much kind of heritage here, and I think because we're at the age of Middle Earth, we're in things like that. You need stuff like that, and that's good to hear that you found it accessible. I thought it was done pretty well in terms of kind of the mythologizing of certain things, and also the way they kind of discuss Numenor, the kind of the island kingdom as well, and the brother of Elrond, and the kind of breaking from the elves and things like that. It's a great story. It's a really, really great story, and I think they showed that. It's great screenwriting, right? They showed it. They didn't tell it. They showed us that I was always closer to his brother. Oh look, it's Elrond on the painting. That's cool. Lovely. It's a very cool thing. And it's good to hear that you kind of picked up on it as well, and that it worked out in that way. I have to admit, having said that, I was a little cooler on this episode. I wasn't jumping up and down with joy in the way I was with those first two, and I've been back and looked at them again in the comforts of my television, not on a giant 3-story house-sized IMAX screen, and found myself to can still be pleasantly kind of entertained and intrigued and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. There are a few things in this that we'll get into that I was a little cooler on, but I want to touch on some of the upsides first, because I don't want to be part of that hating world, So we'll delve into it. First and foremost, we were talking about it just before we started recording this. The orcs, man, they are. I don't think they've ever been as terrifying as this. They are absolutely horrific.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of like moly, orky things. Like they. They've made them more
less scary when you describe them like that.
But they've made them more tunnely. It's like their entire outfit is for tunneling. I know that they tunnel anyway. And are these more goblins than orcs? Are they more goblin-y in this?
No. These are big time orcs. Yeah.
Because the goblins are the more weedy, like. I wondered if they were like tough ass goblins in this, but it's
okay.
Yeah. I mean, they are pretty terrifying. The weird bone masks as well are just a wonderful touch. And to learn that there's this new is it Sauron? Is it not Sauron? In the drop shadow,
I don't
in,
know.
in the in the drop focus,
The
it's
drop shadow.
the drop shadow. He's always been in the drop
Yeah.
shadow. But
Yeah.
in the drop focus, yeah. I mean, it is like you say, it's world building and it's building the mystery. They're trying to build the mystery here. They're trying to befuddle the viewers with a lot of different options on who might be the big bad, who's going to get left behind, like who's really the friends of the elves, what did the elves do.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, right, okay, I see what you're doing. You are setting up a load of, it's like a catacomb of different directions you can go, and most of them will be dead ends. There's going to be one way to go which tells you all of the solutions. But I like the way it's interesting. It said you went back to see the scale of it, basically, but it did feel smaller. I mean, there was the entry to Numenor, which felt a lot like Thrones. There's a couple of things they did on Game of Thrones where they were going past the giant statues of men on a boat into an ancient city, and it's like, oh, okay, there's a rite of passage to this kind of storytelling, this mechanic within storytelling, to be entering into this sort of sacred, ancient, secret place. So that felt very familiar. But I think that was really only the big scale part of it. The rest of it was all quite insular and interior shots and stuff like that. It didn't have that epic scale, apart from the beach. Riding the horses on the beach was amazing. I don't think I've seen TV that beautiful ever. Like, it was just, it must have been a few hundred frames a second, and just the colours and the finish of Galadriel on the horse. It was amazing. It was really special, like framing and filming, and I felt very treated in that moment. But yeah, there are parts of it that felt small around that. What did you think of it?
Yeah, much the same. I think that you're right. That moment there, was just was very special. The on the horse and things like that. I do wonder a little bit what the significance of that is. If we're looking at, if you're looking at this from a cinematic point of view, why? I think maybe other than look how beautiful this is. Why are we doing that? I suppose you could. There's a great moment of joy for Galadriel that she is managing to experience in the middle of all of this, and how long has it been since she last smiled? I suppose so. That's probably the purpose of that, is to really live in that moment and allow her that joy for just a split second, which actually is really, really lovely. What I find really interesting speaking of the scale, those big moments of scale of Numenor, is the design work that they've done there and the kind of the visual storytelling that they've involved in that. Because I know that and I think actually no, it is clear for others as well. So Isildur obviously is the guy who ends up cutting off the ring from Sauron's finger. And taking it and turning away, it's mine now, and all of this, that, and the other, and is Aragorn's ancestor. And throughout the Lord of the Rings, they often reference the fact that the Aragorn has the blood of Elendil, and Elendil is we meet as well, and things like that. So they do quite a good job there of kind of drawing those parallels, and in the design as well. Elendil and Isildur. I mean, Elendil has Aragorn's hair and beard from the Jackson. So, that's a great bit of design, a great bit of parallel. But also, this Numenor, this kind of city where they are, at some stage in the future, they will Elendil and Isildur will leave, and they will establish the realms of Gondor and Arnor on Middle Earth. Now, perhaps that's what we see here. And this is a long way of kind of getting to the fact that Numenor looks like Minas Tirith from those Jackson movies. And I think that's really cool. There's that wonderful sort of long jutting thing that they have. God knows what you call that in terms of architecture, but I'm going to go with long jutting thing, which looks very much like the kind of the bow of Minas Tirith. If it were a ship, it's not. But there's a lot of reminiscent elements of that, and I think that's a lovely choice to kind of make those visual design connections, visual storytelling, things like that, and make them run parallel to each other, because this is this culture that we are seeing here will be the culture that we see in 1,000 years time, whatever it is, when we get to the time of the Lord of the Rings. And you see these the for example, as well, actually, the big kind of guy standing there reaching forward, he's built into the side of the mountain. It's very reminiscent of the Argonath that the Fellowship float past in the Fellowship of the Ring. So, there's lots of kind of design stuff going on there, which I think is lovely for visual storytelling, and a little more elvish design in there in Numenor than there is in Minas Tirith, because they're closer in timescale to when they were, because they're born of elves, etc., etc. Big nerd stuff, but I really appreciated the level of detail there in those epic moments. But to get into what you're actually saying is that the smaller stuff, I liked the smaller stuff. I liked the because I think there was a little bit more weight on the individual in this. I think we were the individual characters and the individual actors had to carry this story this time round, whereas the last two episodes there was a lot of scale, there was a lot of this, there was a lot of that, there was whereas this time it's like no, this time it's you've got to earn your acting chops. You've got to show your acting chops a little bit. And I think by and large that works. I think there are a few smaller moments that didn't, that and I think there was some on the nose stuff as well in terms of the dialogue. I didn't fully get behind, but yeah, I think by and large a lot of it worked. And what I really do like, just to go back to the orcs very quickly, it's really cool to see the orcs. The fact that the orcs can't move in sunlight and the orcs don't like direct sunlight, it's really cool to see that utilized as a plot point, because this is one of those oft mentioned, very rarely shown elements of certainly visual Tolkien. Oh yes, they don't like the sunset. Here he is with glorious sunshine behind him and doing all this. It doesn't always track in that way. But this is a plot point this time, and I really, really appreciated that and thought that was a really great element of this. There's a lot of world building, a lot of attention to detail, and I think that is the strength of this.
I think it's nice that you were saying about the attention to detail on the Numenor, and it looked a bit like Minas Tirith, and like. Minas Tirith is one of the most detailed models I've ever seen. Like, my dad is a big fan, and it's about this big, and it's like a weird, I don't even know what it is. It's the Minas Tirith, and it's carved into like a really dense plaster of Paris, and it's been painted really well, and you can lift it off, and there's a tiny little something underneath. You can hide something in it. I don't even know what it is. It's a thing. Ooh. And it's just, every time I'm around his house, I have to go and pick it up and hold it, because there's just so much detail in the outside of that. I mean, this is a model of a thing in a film, right? And it's just, the attention to detail has been purposely, it's a big thing on purpose, because there's a heritage here, whether it's in the writing of it or the modeling of it or the look of it or whatever. There's a heritage they need to follow. And there's calls I want to make in this story, because I don't know the history of Middle Earth and beyond. I don't know it. I've just seen the films. I've read The Hobbit, and I had the Lord of the Rings read to me as a child, which probably affected me quite a lot. But I haven't reread it. So my historical knowledge of this world is quite fresh, and I'm learning as I go. So I want to make calls on this thing, and I reckon I'm either going to ruin it for people who haven't watched it, or sound like an absolute idiot. The whole what? So what was Isildur's father called?
Elendil.
Elendil. Looking at how he's talking about the elves, he speaks Elvish. He's a descendant of Elros, without doubt. Like, he has to be. They're like, here he is in the library, and it's like that. He's a descendant. Like, he's related to. Like, you can see it in the story, and the way they're putting it forward, and the stories we've seen before. Am I right in that? Is that what's happening here?
You are.
Okay,
they are. So Numenor, all of Numenor comes from that. So the story of that, very briefly, is that Elrond and his brother were both half elven, and they were each given the choice to whether to become to be elves or men. And Elrond chose to be an elf. His brother chose to be man, and so they then the Valar gifted him with longer life, but then he also established Numenor. So these are the Dunedain, and so they have a longer life than the average human does. They are a
Okay.
different race of men. So yes, you are right. Yeah, yeah.
So Isildur is actually he has more longevity than a normal man. And is
Yes,
that
yes.
why Aragon lives so Aragon lives a long time, right? Like 200-300 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm learning all of these things. Like in this
Yay!
okay. I can see it all happening. And from a writer's point of view, I'm like, okay, here's the red herring. Well, you can't tell in some of it, but that's a red herring. These are moments that you should be paying attention to because he's protective of his own heritage here, which is a big like alert. And they are following traditional storytelling methods for a very old story, and it's like okay, and not just in the idea that it goes on for eons, but just that it hasn't been written in the last few years.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
it's a legendary story that has been told to children who are far too young like me, and yeah, it's lovely. I'm liking seeing it come together, and I like that they're not being too clever with the mechanics of it. So there is a lot of history here that people like me are learning now, and it is, I think, to have it. For example, like if Tarantino did it, it would be all over the shop, and you'd be jumping in between different timelines. To have it like that would just be confusing, and I think to have it told in this quite traditional filmic way is really working, particularly for Luddites like me who aren't too familiar with the text.
Luddites. Yeah,
Luddite.
no, I think you're right. I think it is being done in a really lovely and very sensitive way. I think, which is what from the very lovely conversations I got to have with them, was what I know the showrunners are trying to do is to respect the past, make it familiar, but also kind of look to the future. And I think by and large they achieve that. I think I think that. Yeah, I think they're achieving that, and I think they're weaving in the kind of mythology of Middle Earth in a really kind of sensitive and interesting way. I know there are people that disagree with that, and that's fine. But from my perspective, I think it's being done in a pretty well thought out way, and as you say, in terms of structure and things like that, there's a lot of traditional storytelling structure in there. But it is also, I think they're doing some interesting stuff. But then you look at the structure of the Lord of the Rings. You look at that kind of that's hero's journey through and through. It's what it is,
Yeah.
and you can see that here. And I think it would be wrong to go down a different route with this, because the interesting thing about the Rings of Power is that this isn't a book written by anybody that is being adapted. This is taking bits of information and reforming it into a narrative and things like that. This narrative is known, but the details of it are not. The very fine details of it are not known. So that's what I find so interesting about this. And I think by and large they're doing a pretty good job of that here. I do have some gripes, and I've mentioned a couple of them, and so as we're talking about storytelling mechanics, the map thing that they're doing, the
Yes.
Indiana Jones thing, I don't get it. I don't know why. I don't know where they're using it and why they're using it, because they are doing very well at visually differentiating between the different places. They are so you know immediately this is Numenor because it looks like that. These are the Southlands because it looks like that. This is where the Harfords are because it looks like that. So I don't really see why we need the map. I get it as a kind of, so I'm pretty sure Jackson used the map of Middle Earth, which I have up there, which is a very of course I do, I love it. It's a very well known visual, and he used it to kind of land people, places, and things like that in his prologues and things like that. And I think it works. I think it really works well for that. And I think that there is an argument to be made that could have been done really well here, but I don't really get the convention I don't understand what the rule is for when they use the map. Am I missing something? Do you see the reason for it?
I do. I feel they've introduced a new area on every release. Like Numenor's new. So how do
Yeah.
we know where that's going to be if they don't keep up this? Oh, here it is. Then we're going to go across the sea. There's the Southlands. They're off the coast, probably quite close to the direction of the Undying Lands because you got picked up in the water over that way. And it's like, okay, great. I'm finding it quite helpful when they keep going back. Southland. It's like, okay, I get it's the Southlands. They were just in the Southlands. They don't have aeronautical travel yet, so they're probably still going to be in the Southlands because this is the same day. You know, I get that, but maybe they're overusing it at times. But I don't think they should get rid of that. I know they can't because they've already made it, but I don't think that's something they should get rid of. Because I mean, for example, now we're going to see the birth of Mordor. Like this, I think this whole series is going to be about. We're going to have the finale of like, oh, there it is. There's Mount Doom's top blows off or whatever we're going to have. It's going to be bam, like there's Mordor, and we're going to build into it. So we're going to have to see the map become Mordor, like just to make it clear. Like Southlands gets wiped out and it comes up as Mordor. However they do it, I think there's going to be some sort of like big thing about the map because the map's being redrawn as we watch this. So I think it's quite a big. It's like feels like an integral part of the story.
Okay, fair point. That's a fair point. I guess for me, it's just that the I don't understand when they are using it because it feels as though it's kind of been thrown in here, there, and everywhere. If every episode opened on the map and every time we moved to a different location, it used it or whatever it was, then I think I'd get it. Because because there are the rules there. I don't know what the rules are for the map at this point in time because it sort of feels like it's being used occasionally but not consistently. Though you know the new location of Numenor, perhaps that's the rule. You know, when we get a new location, that's when you see the map. So maybe that's it, and perhaps I'm being a little overly critical there. But yeah, I
there's an I think there could be an I don't think I've focused on it entirely yet. I probably will now. We've had this conversation, but I guess there's an inconsistency. Like I was saying, they kept saying Southlands again and again, and it's like, okay, I get that, but did they? I forget. Did they show where the elves were on the map when they were in captive by the orcs? Did they show that?
Yeah, that's the Southlands. Yeah.
So because they've tunneled all the way through, right? So they can take all the villages. But did they then? Was there a point they showed where they were? I can't quite remember what what happened. I might have to rewatch that. But I think because there's people being dragged off and we don't know where they are, it's probably quite important to be able to specify at least a general vicinity of where they are.
Yeah.
And
Middle Earth. Yeah.
General vicinity of Middle Earth, the south bit. It's
yeah.
Down there somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there were some good scenes in this. I mean, the stuff with the Half-Wits was, it's quite harrowing. I think the idea that their whole society is based around you can leave someone behind, like the whole.
Yeah, I know. I thought that.
And then to have an almost religious celebration of their lives, and that was really interesting to see, and you kind of get why. I kind of sort of see where the Shire's going to come from, why it's born in that way, and it's like there was an evidence of guilt around this process. Even Lenny Henry's character, you could see that he was feeling that when he read their names.
Yeah.
Particularly when the girls, it was evidently her family that had died in the mudslide. And he was, he was reading all of their names, and she was probably the only, because she pulls the cart on her own, so she's the remaining member of that family. And there was all these little threads that were very cleverly written in. They weren't exposited to us; they were just there, and you go, "Okay, I get this. Okay, great." But yeah, I really liked the little stories where we're breaking off a lot, and again, not to reference Thrones too many times, but they did that very well to a point, and then it got a bit weird when the series progressed and we were
Yeah.
jumping off in loads of different places and people were moving like huge distances. Yes, there was dragons, but nothing seemed to add up and it got very disjointed. I haven't seen any of that here, which is really wonderful to see. I just want to I'd like to see that they keep that up, that they keep it this tight, even though they're jumping through all these different stories. They all feel interconnected right now.
Yeah, I agree. They do a good job of making them feel interconnected, and I think that perhaps that's part of what the map is. Maybe it is to demonstrate, that this is all on one land and things like that. And no, I think you're right. They do a good job of doing that. I did feel with the Harfoots that the business of nobody goes off the trail, nobody walks alone. That whole business I thought was a little bit on the nose because it's a oh look, it's a we all feel this way, but Nori feels a different way. Look how
Mm.
different they are. I don't know. It's not it distracted me a little bit. At the sort of the chanting of that, it did take me out of the world just for a moment. But I
Mhm.
see it's then later on it is kind of redeemed by this whole business of the left behind, or the left behinders, or I think that's what they call it, something like that. It's a pretty dark. It's a very dark idea.
Yeah.
The idea that and uh, and yeah, that I see how that perhaps they come to find their place finally in the Shire, or
Mm.
okay, now nobody is left behind because this is where we live now. Um, and I like that, and I like the stranger kind of redeeming himself a little bit. He's sort of but also Nori being an apologist for the stranger, I thought was
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting. She kind of very very quickly defends him for killing those fireflies. Oh no, that was an accident. That was an accident.
Oh my god, the
Very quick
music.
to
Every time he does something, it's so serious that it's like dun 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 dun.
yeah.
It's like that guy. He's. I still think it's Sauron. Like he's. What's going on
Clearly bad
there?
guy.
Dun 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 dun. So loads of people die. A leg gets broke, and it's like no no no. It's okay. It's okay. He'll be
Yeah,
fine. He'll be okay. I don't know if he will, but when you were saying
I
about
don't know.
uh, repeating the thing about the Shire, I'm just wondering whether we're going to get like triple founding of lands at the end of this. We'll get, we're going to get Isildur go over to effectively start finding Gondor in a way. He's the first king, right? That was it. That's his
I
legacy.
think I think Elendil was the first. I didn't. What I can't remember,
Lindir,
but yeah,
but he's
But
gonna
but he's the heir of it.
he's gonna be over there doing something. He's going to be over there like finding the way to the. I guess his ancestors will construct Minas Tirith and etc.
Sure.
And then we're going to have finding of um, the Shire
Shire.
potentially, and this could all happen in the last thing, and then we're going to have
Yeah,
the founding of Mordor, and that could all be the last episode here. That we
yeah,
have them
that's
all
true.
finding, the men, the orcs, and the who will become the hobbits, finding their homes. I mean,
Yeah,
it is a lot of building to take on here, but I'm thrilled in watching it. I mean, the I forget the elf's name, the kick-ass one, Arondir.
Arondir.
Arondir, he kicked some asses this episode. He's awesome. Like I like watching
Yeah,
him.
and you know what? I want to talk about that for a second, actually, because there is something so tragic about the death of an elf, and because they are immortal, they shouldn't die. They should never need to. And I think Galadriel says it in the first episode. We didn't have a name for death until
Mhm.
this happened and this happened and this happened, and it's sad when anybody dies, of course, but there is something just deeply tragic about the death of a being that should never have to die.
Mhm.
And this happens twice in this episode, and the musical cue really represents the depth of that kind of depravity, almost, that this has been allowed to happen. And the just the utter despair at the idea of this kind of almost celestial creature meeting its end, because it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. It shouldn't have to happen. And that moment where he sticks his head up over the trench, and again, a lovely visual thing there. The kind of very reminiscent of the First World War. I thought the trenches, the idea of the smoke kind of rising, things like that. We know that the First World War. Yeah, we know the First World War was a big thing for Tolkien. That was a massive inspiration. Though he, on record says often that he doesn't like allegory. But the whole business of that is it was very, very interesting. But as he sticks his head up and he sees his commander standing there, and you just see, and just in the far distance, and that's why it's important. I think that's why the clarity of this and the visual element of this show is important, because you see the orc very far away putting down his bow like that, very, very slowly, and you just see it out the corner of your eye, and in that moment, because the commander is too still and that orc puts his bow down, you realize what's happened before you've seen the outcome, I think. And that's why it's so important to tell stories visually, because you are giving the audience information and you're also hitting home, this is a tragedy. Everything that's just happened was for nothing. Absolutely nothing was achieved. And the heartache of that in a show that's quite kind of, pushes forward, it's always trying to push forward. The fact that you could have a whole sequence like that and nothing be achieved by it is like, it's a gut punch for that, and it really does pull the rug out from underneath you there.
Yes.
I thought that was a brilliant sequence, a really, really well conceived and well executed sequence.
Yeah, I think it was thrilling and heartbreaking in sort of equal measures, and I like the detail of the workforce, that they chucked all of the elves out the front because they're the strongest and they're eternal. They could just dig forever. They just have to feed them a bit. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of get that. And then all the people, the humans are toiling in the back and they're doing what they do with humans in the back, and it's just, it was really cool. And to even to be back in that this wonderful hierarchy between the orcs. Like there's one guy, there's two guys battling over supremacy, then another guy who's definitely their lieutenant comes over, and they fall in line, and just the like at the beginning of is it Two Towers, where it meets back on the menu and all that, that kind of patter between these monstrous creatures, but it's to have them win this fight it hurt. You're like, oh my god, they killed the is it general? He's a general. He shouts general, doesn't he? They've killed the general, his general, and now he's
Watch Warden Revian, I think his name is.
I think it's just oh my god, it was heartbreaking.
It's a real gut punch.
And the scene where they're drinking the water was like, is it poison? Is he going to hit one of them? And you're like, oh, he slit his throat.
On
that
point,
right?
so on the point of slitting his throat there, this is a very violent version of Middle Earth. We have sort of, it's always been violent. There have been wars going on and things like that. But I think this is far more violent than what we've seen realized before on screen. I'm not necessarily against that. I know that some are, and I think they're doing it because, great light casts very dark shadows. You need the light and the shade. You need both elements to do that. And I think there is. I love those original films, but I think there is an element of that does feel those films that can at times feel a little sterilized. It can be a little sort of. It's all very respectful and good and and I think that this is perhaps a slightly. Do you like that? Was just my impression of something.
It was good. It was really good. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have been a choral singer really, but I think perhaps what they're doing here is trying to present something a little bit more grounded, and when they go to a grounded place, that's where they are. Where they are in a more ethereal place, that's where they are, and they're going for broke on both of them. So I think I may have talked myself out of actually that being a problem there, but I do think that, I don't know, perhaps, and I hate to mention it again, but perhaps this is a Thrones issue. Maybe what I'm doing there is I'm seeing the fact that there's a bit of gore, and I'm equating that with Game of Thrones, and thinking,
Maybe.
well, it doesn't feel like Tolkien now because it's Game of Thrones. When in fact that's nonsense. There's been. I mean, the first thing that we see happen is that some guy cuts his bloody finger off.
Yeah.
It's never been a particularly. I don't know. What do you think? I might be overthinking that a little bit.
I don't know. I think to have there's 8 hours of this plus, right? I think we're going to have more in it because it's that long. Like if we save the gory deaths till once every 3 episodes, I think people are it's going to lose its pace a little bit. So yeah, it is more violent than we're used to, but only to a point, because the big battles of the Jackson films were really violent.
Yeah.
So it's just we're just now immersed in the world in which they're set, and we're seeing the stuff that happens outside of the war and outside of main storylines. Well, I know we're going to get a Balrog in this potentially, but there's that kind of grandeur. We're seeing lots of grandeur, but we're also seeing the politics and the relationships between the races and things like that, which we've not been privy to that much before. We've had it presented to us on screen, but we haven't gone into too much into the minutiae of the relationships between people. So because we're so because we're going into that in such depth, we do need to keep the pace up somehow, and that's going to come with throat slitting and all sorts of horrific deaths.
Yeah,
and black
absolutely.
Out of cows and things, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was gruesome, wasn't it? Yeah. But then we also actually, the more I think about it now, they also were giving birth to Uruk-hai in big mud pits in the Two Towers. So scratch that entire argument. That's I'm full of nonsense. But finally, I want to look ahead now to to what's coming up and kind of the future of the series and where we're kind of going from there. They not so subtly a couple of times mention the name Ardar, which is the title kind of name of this episode, and they make the point that Ardar is one of the names that Sauron goes by. Now we are we are shown the gloved hand of that resembles very much the kind of design of Jackson's Sauron, and we're shown a sort of not a drop shadow but a drop focus image of a person approaching, and everything about that I think is supposed to be, here, this is Sauron, and I don't know, I think that if this is Sauron, then cool, I'm all for it, and I'd be interested to see where it is. If it's not, I'm almost more excited, because I think that I almost like the idea that this maybe is a copycat. It's somebody who has taken on the name Ardar to propagate, to take control of these orcs or something like that, and it's maybe, I don't know, so maybe perhaps like a fallen elf, or I don't know, I don't know really, but I think they are pushing us very hard to think that this fella is Sauron, and we are only at episode 3 of what will be a multi-series expansive narrative that is potentially going to go on for a really long time. So I'd be quite surprised if we get the big bad, and Sauron is the big bad as well. Morgoth is gone, so that Sauron is the big bad, right? So I'd be pretty surprised if we got him there. What do you think?
I think they're pointing at it too much for it to be. I think it is a double fake, that we're going to think it is Sauron, and then I think the show is going to say, from the point of view of the orcs and Arondir and whoever's seeing him, he's going to be presented as such, and we're going to believe that because that's what's in front of us, and then it's going to turn out it's not. It's someone.
Yeah.
It's one of his generals. It's just it's someone using the name. It's a trick. Whatever it is, I'd be quite disappointed if that was Sauron this early, considering how in the shadows he has been throughout the cinematic universe of Lord of the Rings. It's very in the shadows, like physically. So to then just pop him up in episode 3 would be like, what? No, you can't do that.
Seems like an anticlimax, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it would be really cool as well to have that sort of fake out there, because this whole time, those of us who will do this kind of thing and kind of analyze these images and things like that are picking up on similarities to the Jackson films and things like that. And I really love the idea that they would put something in there. The gauntlet is what I'm referring to. That they would put something in there that makes us, that we would recognize as being that of Sauron. That then turns out not to be him, and so they're using our own sort of knowledge and our own sort of knowledge of what's come before to unseat us and to fuel that red herring. I would be really into that if that's the way this goes, and something tells me that is where it's going. I'd be pretty excited about that. I think that'll be a really clever way of using what's come before to kind of establish its own thing.
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, the gauntlet is like they're signposting something using that, and it's that's from kind of a different franchise in a way, even though they're all connected. And it's like, great. I like that they're being clever with this, and I'm sure they are. It was a real Rubik's cube of a script to write each episode because of the rights they have to each. I can't remember what it was. They bought the pages of the prologue. Is that right?
They have the rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, including any associated appendices. So they don't have the rights to the Unfinished Tales. They don't have rights to the Silmarillion. They don't have rights to a whole bunch of stuff that would directly affect this. Though I suspect that they have managed to do some deals to use certain things in certain places. And the question was put to them, do you think you have enough to make this work? And they're very confident, and thus far it seems to be the case. So yeah, that's what they have rights to. So they are there. I think you're probably right. I think this is kind of a bit of a backflipping, interesting experience to try and write this, given that they don't necessarily have everything.
I think it would have been a lot of fun, but also a lot of stress to do it. They'd probably have one of those enormous boards with pins and strings and stuff, and you can't go over to that side of the red string because that breaches the copyright law. And it would have I think it would have been quite a tightrope to walk writing this thing, but it seems to hold together from a storytelling point of view. And I know they've in episode 2 or episode 1 there was reference to the Silmarils, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I know of the Silmarillion, and I know that they didn't have the rights to it just from reading Variety or whatever, and I know that. But then I'm like, oh well, they have referenced. That must be something from that, right? Is that something from the Silmarillion? Is that the Silmarils?
Who knows? I'm not telling
you. Okay, don't. I'm asking questions
just in case, because
as well as everyone else.
I don't want to be, because I imagine it won't come to anything directly, but because we are so close in time to that book and to those stories, I don't want to.
Okay,
I don't want to ruin anything, because it could be that they become relevant. It also could be that Amazon acquire the rights to utilize characters' names and places from the Silmarillion in future episodes and future series. So we may yet find that there are some references there. So I'll keep my mouth shut on that one.
Well, the more that comes through the screen, the better, because I can stop besmirching the history of Tolkien. Ham-fistedly talking about it.
But the thing is that there is something quite, and can be quite intimidating about Tolkien, and can be a little sort of almost elitist in a way. that there is a little bit of kind of gatekeeping that goes on with this world, a little bit. And I think that it should be accessible. It should be accessible to people. This is a new interpretation of something that's come before. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. That's okay. Like it doesn't harm books. It doesn't harm anything that will occur. So it should be that you can have no knowledge of the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit. You should be able to come to this as a fresh new series and be able to get on board with the world and understand what's going on. You should be able to do that. And so it's good that you are having the experience, that you are learning stuff, and that you're interested to learn stuff as well. That's good, because it could be very dry if they weren't careful about it. So it's good. It's very good that's kind of holding up. Yeah, it's a good thing, I think. I think we did it, Brad. I think this is. I am definitely cooler on this than I was the first two, but I also think that we maybe needed a breath here. To this is perhaps the final death throes of Act 1, and then the birth of Act 2 that we're witnessing. And I expect now we're having this bad guy introduced. Maybe we will be. And, it sounds like Galadriel was off to Middle Earth and things like that. So this is lots of interesting stuff to come, I think, from the following few episodes. So, yeah, good stuff. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming along and joining us to talk about this. And yeah, thank you for watching Rings of Power Episode 3, Amazon Prime, as you are well and truly aware, so you can go check it out there. We've got episodes 1 and 2 covered in the previous episode of this, I believe. So you can go check that out there. And we will be back now probably in a week's time for some more Middle-earth conversation with the Rings of Power Episode 4. So until then, have a great time. Bye-bye.